So one of the most common questions I get is, are people like Scott Ritter or Jackson Hinkle or Colonel McGregor, are they on Putin's payroll? Or a variation of that is, they are on Putin's payroll. If I had a dime for every time somebody said that, I'd be a very, very rich man. Well, we're going to address that here in this particular video. What we're going to do is look at this DW video. It's about just a couple minutes long, and we're going to go through that and unpack when somebody is or how you can tell or that kind of thing. So let's listen to this.
A leading German journalist is facing allegations of being in the pay of the Kremlin, according to new revelations by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists.
Okay, so we're going to look at this one German journalist, and who is the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. They do some pretty good work. They're just trying to find out what's going on in the world, and they're the guys that broke the Panama Papers. There's a Netflix video about the Panama Papers that I would highly recommend that you watch if you want to understand how they work and how they function. Okay, let's keep going.
Bert Zeipel, who wrote a biography of Vladimir Putin, allegedly received more than €500,000 from sources connected to the Russian president. Zeipel has long been regarded in Germany as an independent expert on Russia.
And if you were the Kremlin, who would you want more than an authoritative voice that is independent, that paints you in a good light? And that's apparently what's going on here. Now, this isn't the first time that the Russians have been doing this. This was an article from just a few weeks ago, November 7th. U.S. says that Russia funds Latin America-wide anti-Ukraine disinformation drive. So the Kremlin's ultimate goal appears to be to launder its propaganda and disinformation through local media in a way that feels organic to Latin American audiences. So here's the talking points, and if you can find people that will cozy up to the Russian position, now that doesn't mean that they're paying for it, right? That's not what it's saying necessarily. It could be, it might not be, but they're trying to make their point through local media, and that's essentially what this guy is going to be doing by being the independent journalist saying good things about Putin in books like, well, this. Okay, and these are a number of his books about Putin, and yeah, so that's where we are. Okay, let's get back to this video.
DW's chief political correspondent, Nina Haza, is following the story for us. Nina, what more can you tell us about Hubert Zeipel and the allegations he's facing?
Well, Hubert Zeipel is very well known here in Germany, is an influential voice, has won awards for his reporting, has been introduced to talk shows as the German journalist with the best access to Vladimir Putin, has had sit-down interviews with him, etc. But there is an investigative group of journalists called Cyprus Confidential who are currently looking into a big batch of documents that they've got where there's evidence that Russian oligarchs are trying to take influence on influential European voices here, and they...
Okay, so the way that this process works, I read about it yesterday. I talked about it in my 3 Big Stories video. And if you don't know who I am, I'm just a professor who tries to help you understand context in the war in Ukraine. If you want daily updates, please subscribe and hit the bell. Every day I do a 3 Big Stories thing. It takes about 3 minutes, and I just hit the high notes of what's going on. And this was one of those that I covered yesterday in 3 Big Stories. So the way that this works was that it wasn't paid directly by Moscow, but there was an offshore account from an oligarch connected closely to Putin. And the guy wrote books that were like really complimentary of Putin or put him in a very good light. And so that's what this looks like. Now, is that happening with others? Is that happening with, and the most common question I get is Tucker Carlson. I don't know. I don't know if he's a true believer or if he's getting paid. He's making money. He's capitalizing on what's going on, but we don't know if he's paid by Moscow or Scott Ritter or McGregor or so on and so forth.
They have found documents that prove that for a book that Zeipel wrote about Putin, he received 2 payments from a company linked to Alexei Mordashov. Now, that's, of course, an oligarch who's very close to Putin, and since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, he's on the EU sanctions list. So Zeipel got €200,000 and then another €400,000 as part of a sponsorship deal for the book. And what's very, very tricky here is that the publisher of the book says that they had not been aware of such a deal, and they
Okay, so let's unpack how that works. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that he's gotten money to be sponsored, to write his book, to work on something. That could happen. Like, you could be sponsored by a third party to do research on something, and nobody would bat an eye. But if the publisher is not aware of what's going on, if the publisher didn't know, if it looks like it's trying to be hidden, there's more potential for a problem, and that is coming from a Russian oligarch, and it's coming from somebody that's close to Putin, just makes it stink to high heaven. So is it likely that there's something shady here? I can't say that it is necessarily so, but it doesn't look good. And this could be the model for how other people might be receiving funds. They're not, waving it around saying, yes, I'm receiving money from a Russian oligarch. So, okay.
Have now stopped selling Zeipel's book. Zeipel argues there was no influence by third parties regarding the content of his book, but he's also...
And that very well could be true, but it looks like he's receiving monetary payments that could influence him a different direction. Now, he could have intestinal fortitude and a spine of steel and decide that, no, in spite of that money, I'm still going to... But it just is it's a very bad look, and it's very possible that this was influence.
Produced films for public broadcaster ARD, and ARD also say that they were not aware of any such sponsorship deals. So Zeipel has seriously undermined his own journalistic credibility, and this is probably not.
And that's something you just can't do, right? It's almost, and this is a poor analogy, but if a dentist is sponsoring Halloween, that's kind of a bad look, right?
The last case that we're going to be seeing, because these investigative journalists are continuing digging.
Nina, are there any insights on what might have driven Zeipel to comply with this, to do this in the first place? Is it as simple as money talks?
You'd have to ask him. He was incidentally asked 2 years ago by a fellow journalist, have you ever received any money from Moscow? And he brushed those accusations off straight away and said, no, of course not. I'm a journalist.
Okay, but that he says, no, of course not. I'm a journalist. And yet he's receiving money, makes me lean even more toward the theory that something may be going on here. And I can't prove it. I'm not going to say, like, yes, this is happening, but it just looks bad. Now, how do foreign actors get influence? This is from the CIA. CIA.gov is actually the sponsor of this particular article. From an alternative framework for agent recruitment, from mice to rascals. Okay, so what are mice? Mice are things like money. These are the things that the CIA is looking for when they're trying to turn someone, and the Russians do the same thing on the other side, right? Money, they want money. That's possibly what's motivating the guy. Ideology, that you already are sympathetic to a certain thing. Coercion or compromise, that is, that you could be blackmailed and can, be turned for that reason. Or ego and excitement. Ego, it's like, well, they feel like I'm important, right? Okay. Now, the article also goes on from mice to rascals. Well, what are rascals? So this goes back to Robert Cialdini. Now, I use Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, Science, and Practice, in my Power and Influence class. Rascals are RASCLS, reciprocation, like you do something for me, I'll do something for you, and that's how that works. Authority, we tend to defer to authority. It's weird, but when my medical doctor, my family doctor that I go to like every 6 months, just for a regular checkup, found out that I have a PhD, he started treating me deferentially, and I'm like, I don't know anything about medicine, so talk to me like I'm a 4-year-old and just explain things in the most simple term, because I don't want him to assume that I know things that I actually don't know, or assume that I know things I actually don't know. Okay, S is for scarcity. When something's scarce, it becomes more valuable. Gold is less abundant than, say, water, so it becomes more valuable. Commitment and consistency. We trap ourselves by trying to be consistent, and people will play on that. Liking. People will pretend to like you or cozy up to you in order to take something from you or get some. And then finally is social proof. Other people, and you'll see this all the time in the media once you start looking for it. Social proof is, well, other people agree that this is a great thing. Look how many people bought that thing. And so, oh, well, if they're buying it, it must be a good thing. Okay, so rascals and mice are way the trick. And M in money, or M in mice, is money. And that's what this looks like this is about. Okay, back to where we were.
There is this attempt. He's probably tempted by that possibility also to be portrayed as one very influential voice in the German debate. He is being, or he was being introduced and invited to several talk shows. He was very...
And that's the ego factor in M-I-C-E. Its ego is the E. And yeah, so sure, it built up his credibility and he got it from there. So he's going to keep dancing with the one who brung him. So, okay.
Very, very influential here. So that is why it's such a big deal to now find out that he has indeed received money from a Russian oligarch. He doesn't deny that.
Nina Haase, many, many thanks.
Okay, so the next question that we want to address is, how does that affect others? So I do a number of reaction videos here, and there's an entire playlist about
Most
reaction
people have
videos.
no clue.
Let's pause this. And I just want to show you like who's on the reaction video list, right? So we have lots with Solyov, and here's Clayton Morris and Scott Ritter, and here's Richard Medhurst. Now Vlad is, I'm actually amplifying his voice. Doug McGregor, Scott Ritter, Timothy Snyder. Again, that's amplification. Petraeus, amplification. Seymour Hersh. Okay, so you see these guys. Scott Ritter again, the Duran. Okay, Tucker Carlson. Okay. I do these to ask the question of why are they saying what they're saying, and then trying to understand where they're coming from and what they want to achieve. And the comments in there are regularly, well, Tucker Carlson's on the take. Scott Ritter, he must be getting paid. Honestly, I think Scott Ritter is just a true believer. He may be getting paid. He's certainly getting paid by selling his book in Russia in large quantities. Whether anybody's reading it or not, I'm sure the Russian authorities are buying it up in spades. Okay, so there's ways of getting paid, and then there are ways of getting paid. So this guy that we're talking about is getting paid directly. I don't know how many are or are not getting paid this way, but there are multiple ways that they can profit from that. But I think for most of them in the MICE money, so this guy, this German author, is directly getting paid by money. But there's also influence, or ideology rather, and so ideology I think is what's driving, say, Scott Ritter. I think there's a ego chip on the shoulder for McGregor, or maybe there's ego and for Tucker Carlson. I don't know exactly what the motivations are, but now that you know what to look for, you can start thinking about that for yourself. And ultimately, that's my goal, is that you're thinking for yourself. Now, I could be completely wrong about everything that I said, and if I am, that's fine. You don't have to believe me. Prove what I say. Prove it against other sources. Check out other sources. Don't just listen to me. Hear what others have to say. Again, thank you for your time. Please, I would urge you to subscribe if you want more videos like this. Subscribe and hit that bell. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, the subscribes. Thank you for the coffees. I really appreciate that. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.